All right, thanks everybody for coming to our job role data and AI. Ayaz and I are going to give you a brief intro of who we are, how we got where we are, talk about different roles, and then you guys to discuss. You want to start?
Sure. So, Ayaz Haji, I've been in financial services for now about 20 years. Done a variety of roles, started as a software engineer, then kind of did some great stuff, moved to data, grew up kind of in data over the last kind of 6 or 7 years. Last year, I got a new bank. Before that, I was at Credit Suisse, where I was the data officer. Currently at Bank of New York, where I'm leading their transformation of the entire bank.
So I'm Theo, from Eastern Canada, rural Canada, studied engineering, came to do a PhD at Cambridge. I realized I didn't want to be a professor or do anything academics, and he said, you should apply to a bank. That's weird, but I wasn't checking their website. Sure enough, they wanted engineers. Did an internship at Goldman Sachs 30 years ago. And just sort of enjoyed it because it was a whole new world I didn't know anything about. And I worked at Goldman for 8 years. And I went to a tech company called Palantir, which is sort of how I got into data, and worked there across many different industries, clients, public sector, private sector. And then sort of last September, actually, I joined a company called Grimes, which is actually not, it's been around for 25 years, as head of AI product. And so now I'm kind of bringing together my finance and data and archives.
We were gonna just give, like, I guess, brief history of the space. We thought that might be useful to kind of understand where we're at the moment. Come in, and then we talk a bit about different roles, right, that we have within financial services. And we wanted to leave a bit of time for questions, as we anticipated there might be a couple given the subjects. So, one thing to appreciate, and especially for those from technical backgrounds, is the way I see the world is you kind of have like these 3 different maturity curves, and I'm hugely generalizing it. But you have a software maturity curve, right, for software engineering, which is pretty mature, right? And especially since like advent of cloud, right, you've got a lot more SaaS out-of-the-box solutions to software, whereas before, a lot of people would be building it in-house, buying stuff. So really, like, the return on innovation there, I think is quite small compared to what it was, even like 5 or 10 years ago. And then the second maturity curve is one around data. So, the data maturity curve is a funny one because it's not really a curve, it's more like kind of a zigzag line. And that's because data is quite hard for people to grasp. Software is easy to grasp because, you're on your phone, right? You're playing with an app. How often do you actually think about the data behind that application? Unless you're really building it, probably not too much. Data has come to the fore with things like privacy, etc. So, it's becoming a bit more mainstream. But internally, I tell people, and I used to tell people when I was the CDO, that, it's a great con because everyone talks about software, but no one really talks about data. And actually, data is something that everyone can really understand. But
often software is useless without data.
Software, doesn't work without data. And actually, like, people obsess over the software, like, lines and boundaries. So it's quite funny. And then the third is obviously AI. And, one of the things that's become apparent to us, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a bit, is, AI requires data, right? I was actually CP talk with their CEO a few weeks ago, and that was like, his main point is, if you haven't really got your data, in order, you're not going to have much luck with the AI that sits on top of that. And so data's had a bit of a resurgence, right? On the coattails. But also look at, you can look at companies like Snowflake, Databricks, right? There's still talented, still a lot of innovation and value accretion going on there. So, in terms of like, what does that mean to you? Why am I talking about this? Really depending on like what interests you in terms of maturity. Do you want to go into a space which is fully known, right? You kind of know what you're doing, that software, maybe something a bit less less known, but you kind of have the contours there, that's data, and then something a bit unpredictable and unknown, that's AI, right? So it's a kind of good mental way to think about it.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess in terms of like the different roles, like there can be very technical sort of hands-on roles where maybe you are a software engineer or a data engineer or a machine learning engineer and you're sort of in the bowels of writing code and programming and things like that. Or there's sort of, I guess, more sort of people-y roles around that because ultimately like you're trying to do this for a purpose, right? I think that's sort of where data got a bit lost for a while, was that people were just doing these data projects without thinking about what's the business value that we're going to get out of it. And I think that's what I find really fun, is sort of being at that intersection between the business and the technology, and making sure that we're using it to actually achieve an outcome. Because otherwise it's fun, but at the end of the day, you're not really going to get it more. So I like to sort of go like I'm products. So that means that like I have some AI engineers that sort of, I don't want to say do my bidding, but basically do what I tell them. I go and talk to clients, figure out what we should do, figure out how the AI should fit in with our existing products, because we have a product suite. It's like we're not just going to throw that away and start with something new random. So yes, it's sort of about, for me, it's very much about figuring out the use my skills and the data to inform the AI to do good things. But to your point about the data being very important, right? Like when I was at Palantir, you just go to a big client, they'd be like, we want to do AI. It's like, where's your data foundation? We don't have one. It's like, you have to start there. You have to start at the bottom and work your way up.
Yeah. Another thing to think about here is, depending on the size of company you join, like the lines blur a lot more. So, and I'm guessing, you've been there like, it's a smaller company, but the bigger the company, the more defined the role is probably going to be. The smaller the company, the more you can blur across these kind of three things. So if you're listening to us and you're like, oh, but I want to work on it all, right? That may
pick a small company. I think that was something, James, you said in your session earlier, right? Really figuring out what size of company you want. I think it's hard, and I think maybe the way you do it is by just trying them all. And maybe that's through internships or, but it's like, I now know I don't want to work at a massive bank, like, right? I've done that, no thanks, right? But I also don't really want to work at a company of 5 where I have to do everything myself. Like, I like my company sort of 400-ish, so sort of like big enough that we have IT and we have HR, but it's small enough that the CEO sits right there and I can say, hey, Brad, I think we should do something differently, and like it has a real impact.
Yeah, great. But so when she joins a big bank, remember to message her. Well, you want to go to do that. No, but the only other thing I would say, which is probably like not that intuitive, and then maybe we can take some questions, so start thinking about it. I actually think like financial services, right, doesn't get a lot of credit for innovation, but financial services actually has been one of the forefronts of innovation for decades, I would say. A lot, like, it doesn't get the press around innovation because naturally, right, there is a competitive advantage a lot of the times.
Yes, they're not selling like yes,
exactly, and it's not in your face because it's not a consumer product all the time. And so there's a lot of innovation, and this gets to your point around work for a bank. Even I'm lucky enough to be standing here today because someone at university said, let's go and apply to a bank, and I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
We're studying like computer science, right? And so if that conversation hadn't happened, I wouldn't be there. And so there is a lot of innovation that's going on. The tech budgets of banks.
That's just in the budget's a big thing.
Yes, they're in the billions. I think JP Morgan one is in excess of $10 billion now. But so. And
they have more than 100 people working on AI.
Yeah.
Which is why I try not to get too impressed when their products way more impressive than AI.
Yeah, so a lot of investment, a lot of opportunities there as a result of that. So, all right, let's take some
questions. I think you got my attention first.
Thank you so much for this workshop. Just a question about getting into this kind of industry from a data and AI kind of point of view. This is assumption, but most of the people who are applying will be people who has no experience inside this fintech world or the banking industry. And what would you say? How should one showcase their skills to these industries?
Yeah. So I'll start and maybe you can add. So the best way, right, is to try to get an internship. We both did internships. You did yours at Goldman straight away. I went to UBS first, then it's the wrong case.
Yeah.
But you know, an internship is really, I would say, the optimal for a couple of reasons. The one is that it's a good length, usually about 10 weeks or so. So really kind of, you really do get a feel of what the place is like. And
And you get
you're
a chance to actually
yeah.
do something.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a week, right? It's,
Yeah, exactly. But then the second benefit, which is far greater, is it may lead to a job, right? So, they may just offer you a job at the end of the internship after your degree. So, that's always the thing I encourage young people to try and get to. The applications for that is around, now. So, for next summer. So get your applications in early to, as many firms as possible. Even if it's a firm you may not be sure about, just doing the process, going for the interviews may be useful, right? In terms of preparing you for future ones. If you can't do that, I would say just try to get some kind of tangible work experience. That could be like a not-for-profit, charity project, could be an open source project, right? Open source now, you can become a contributor very easily to open source projects, right? There's no screening per se, other than are you good enough, and you learn a lot through kind of the feedback and stuff.
Yeah, and I guess I would say just there's so many resources online. So I spent last summer looking for a job and just learning about AI. And that was doing courses from people learning about AI, doing practical things, reading, and so you can kind of do a little, make your a little mini portfolio of things that you've done, even if it's not official work experience. Yeah. And the open source contribution is a great idea. But even if you maybe aren't that kind of technical, you can still say here's some use cases I did and what was the value. And I think going back to that point of always remember to talk about the business value of what it is that you were trying to do.
Great.
You mentioned that you're trying to communicate, new things that to do at clients. You can have a way that you explain to say not police, but actually that's AI is a big buzzword right now. So a lot of people come in thinking that AI can replace things.
Yes.
It's not really useful to do. Is there, a way that you find it's just explains to people who maybe aren't as
It's a good point because I get tons of people coming to me every week being I need AI. And I'm no, you don't. You just need some automation or some data or something like that. I'm trying to prove it with data because I think that's always the best way. So it's okay, you think we need AI? Okay, let's put your data in here. Let's ask you a question about the data. Oh, and it's just returned the row that all this smells. So, okay. And it just doesn't take long for people to realize that. And I guess just having sort of tangible examples of if you don't have a physical system, then you can show them what
May I ask what's the most recent project that involved either data science or AI in both companies that was successful and about the business?
Yeah, so what's the thing that I've released out to the public is what we call we have a product called a data lakehouse, which is one of our delivery mechanisms for data to clients. And I have put a copilot on top of that, so you can ask questions about the data just in English, right? So that might be find me ETFs that have high female board representation that track the S&P 500, or if it's in our investment management platform, it could be what's my exposure to Microsoft, who's managing one's in-house, or if there's something happens globally and you want to know, do I have exposure to a particular region, and that kind of thing. And it just allows non-technical people to figure out what the data is and get some insights. But it's also quite useful for helping technical people just quickly get some code that they can then turn into a proper report. That's something they would apply.
We have probably 100 plus projects around AI and data.
That's the benefit of going in a big bank versus a smaller company.
Have a team called the AI Hub, right? Which isn't a massive team, but they are dedicated to partnering with different people internally. I would say there's various types of flavors of AI projects that are going on. And I'll talk more about the internal ones, but there's a lot of client-facing and external ones as well. But some of the internal ones, I'll give you an example. So say we're working right, at BNY, I could ask, the AI, okay, right, what's Theo's OKRs for this year? And then it will kind of go and look that up on the system and give that back to me, right? I can ask, who's Theo's manager? Because he's okay, I'll say, look at, no, but just basic, like a virtual assistant that, is really kind of gathering knowledge, right, from all of the kind of knowledge bases that we have.
Yeah, you share points.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And Microsoft actually has done a reasonable job actually now of kind of stitching a lot of this together. So it's pretty good. It's pretty easy to iterate on top of the foundations that they're giving. You can kind of see the open AI.
I've got a question. How can people kind of immerse themselves at the moment? Because obviously everyone's playing ChatGPT.
Yeah.
But how can people take that a bit further? The platforms I work with, the course on, what's the facts, things like that. You talk about what people can get their hands on now, start getting understanding of how these things work.
How many GPUs?
Yeah.
No, but I think that some of the deep learning courses are really good, right? Like they'll have like the materials on one side, and you'll have a little thing on the right where you can actually just write the code and things like that. That's
Yeah, prompt engineering is probably quite accessible to people.
There's lots of stuff on Coursera as well for free. If you want the certificate, you also need to pay like £40 or something. But there's tons of stuff you can do it there for free.
Yeah. Kind of depends how technical the person is, right? Could go and like start, downloading models and stuff, right? Which are open source.
I think there's some of the smaller models that you were mentioning.
Yes.
So, but like, if you're not that, that technically minded or trained, just go and start playing with prompt engineering. I think it's quite accessible. There's a real question.
Yeah, so
Say not like a fight for the last question.
Okay.
sorry. So a big problem in all companies, whether data or not, data driven, is the quality of data that they have, especially when they're using in models. So we have products for governance, categorization, essentially democratizing data. But how useful would a product be that would rate data quality using these capabilities, either through internal or best practices coming from places like Forrester or Gartner, things like that would help define those the algorithms and the models.
I think it's tough because data quality means different things in different contexts. So I think the answer to your question was very useful. I just think it's quite difficult to make something generic because, maybe it's like you need someone to check if it's nulls. Maybe it needs to be something totally different depending on the application. So I think it's difficult, but I think it's better.
Yeah, I would separate there's hygiene and there's quality. So hygiene is kind of what you said, like, does it even make sense, right? Is it filled in what it's meant to be filled in? But quality is a spectrum. So, the quality of data for our regulatory reports has to be extremely high. For our financial reports has to be extremely high. The quality of data we're using to generate analytics and maybe think about leads, right, doesn't have to be extremely high, right? Because it's only used internally. It's only used to kind of like, it has an error tolerance as a way to think about it. And one of the things someone once told me, not to do with data, nor to do with SRE, was Google. If you go to Google and you try to Google search, has it failed for anyone when they've tried to do a Google search? Like, it happened one time to me, and I was like, what? Then I tried to get it, and it worked again. But like, Google has an error tolerance, right? They're like, we're okay to fail, 0.1% of the time, right? Because you'll just refresh a page and then you do it again, right? Whereas data, depending on the purpose, can be a big problem. Yeah.
My last point to finish off.
I think I'm supposed to be somewhere
Yeah,
else.
I'll
now.
set up.
Yeah, I guess I'm finding me somewhere else.
So I'd just say try it. Like, take the first step, right? Do the course. I think the courses are an excellent idea. There's so much more accessible now than there was when we were.
Yeah, well, I mean, even than there was last week, there's more today.
Yeah. But yeah, get stuck in.
Well, round of applause, but I